We are so excited to kick off our series, Raising the Bar, Curriculum for Next Generation of Leadership in Dance, with my dear friend and extraordinary advocate for the arts, Lauren Cramer, who is a partner at McLaughlin Stern. Lauren, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Liza. I'm so happy to be here.
Tell us about you before we get started on Dance Company in a Box, which you were so generous to provide us with. Tell us about you.
I'm an attorney, but a human being. I'm going to give you a taste of my elevator pitch, which is I do not-for-profit corporate law. What does that mean? So I say, I'm actually the Greek goddess of not-for-profits. I birth them, I raise them, and I kill them, which means not-for-profit is made up of private foundations on one side, which are people with resources that want to change the world. And on the other side are public charities, which are those people with a dream that want to change the world. So I birth them, raise them, kill them, which means incorporation. Raising means compliance, tax, agreements, collaborations, and kill them means dissolution, mergers. So it's the whole life cycle of not-for-profit organizations, charities.
And I know you are a proud graduate of Syracuse University. Tell us about your educational background, how you got to McLaughlin Stern, how you decided to focus on being the Greek goddess of not-for-profit corporate law.
I went to undergrad at Northwestern in Chicago.
Woo-hoo.
And spent, you're a Chicago native, then spent the next nearly 8 years in not-for-profit in the arts. I literally worked in fundraising for, among others, National Dance Institute, Martha Graham, and the Joyce, which I still believe is the most important dance presenter in North America. Then what happened was, as I'm raising money, I felt I needed credibility because no one was taking me seriously as this young wannabe dancer. And I went to law school. And while I was in law school, I co-founded a dance theater company.
Because you had too much spare time?
I don't. But when one has passion, one finds the time to do it. The reason why the arts is my passion is it started with my grandfather, who danced in that old Fred Astaire film, Top Hat.
I forgot that. Oh my gosh.
I literally went through every frame of the dance line with the dance boys all in tuxedos and top hats and found him. So dance is really, really important to me.
So let's jump into Dance Company in a Box. And again, we are so grateful. So as you know, DDP's mission is to advance women and girls in dance and frankly, make the field more equitable, better run, and more transparent, less toxic overall. And I was so excited when you agreed to help us on this project. So the idea is just to lay it out there. Give everybody access to the foundational documents they need when they start a dance company. And so thank you again for that. Can you go over for us and for anybody listening? It's on our website. There's no paywall. We don't believe in that. What you included and why you included the documents you did.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you I'm a big fan of your work. You've made an amazing impact on the field. And so the way my toolbox that I can bring to you to continue your work in all aspects of dance is here. Before I dive in, though, I just want to give two definitions because many people will hear the words not-for-profit or hear the words charity. Just for everybody's knowledge, when I say a not-for-profit corporation, that is simply an entity. It is a suit of armor that you as an individual artist, you as an individual choreographer can don to protect yourself and go out there and do your mission. You've heard, corporate entities, S Corp, C Corps, limited liability companies, whatever they are. But for us, what's important is a not-for-profit corporation. That is where You have a name now. It is no longer, for example, Lauren Cramer dancing. I am now Lauren Cramer Dance Co. Inc. So that's the first definition. The second definition is when I say tax exempt or 501c3, this is a designation that comes from the IRS. Don't get scared. This is where the IRS is your friend. The IRS wants to help all of us raise money and provide a tax donation deduction for a donor. So before I start, there are two points of points of knowledge. A not-for-profit corporation is different than a 501c3 entity. Hopefully that helps. Okay, sorry, Liza, a bit long, but go ahead.
That's fine. And what we'll do is when we've talked about the documents that you provided us, DDP followers, we'll circle back and talk about when it makes sense to become a 501c3 and when it might not make sense, where it might make sense to use a fiscal agent instead.
Okay, so in the ballet company in a box, the first one is the certificate of incorporation. Referring back to my Greek goddess, how I birth the organizations, this is the birth certificate. Now, I'm a New York State attorney. I can practice here, but this applies to all 50 states in this country, that you need your birth certificate. And in that, you have your name of your company, you have the directors, usually 3 minimum, and your mission. Very important. Shall I continue? Or do you want to?
Yes, please. Yes, please. And I would just throw in there that I think a lot of particularly in dance companies throw out a mission and don't come back to it. And I think Dance Data Project revisits his mission every 4 to 6 months, make sure that we're doing what we said we were going to do in the mission, and also that the mission still makes sense as stated.
That's really valuable. Without getting into the weeds, this is one best practice that I ask all nonprofits to do during the annual meeting, review their mission. So again, exactly what you said, to make sure you are doing what you said you're doing, because things happen and you get excited about another opportunity, but not sure whether or not it really makes sense.
And everybody can't do everything. And you really, your mission, I mean, is your calling card. So, and you can learn quite a bit about a dance company based on what they say their mission is. All right, document number 2, we've got the birth certificate.
Well, the first one is certificate of incorporation. Next, we have our bylaws. Now, these are guidelines and rules for the company. I know it sounds kind of like ethereal or even clumpy, kind of. I'm not sure how else to say it, but it's very important so that it's a scaffolding for you, a framework for what you should do. For example, you'll say that you will have not less than 3 directors, that you will meet at least once a year, that your mission is X and not Y, that that it gives authority to the president to do something and not the authority to your managers to do something. So it really lays out the rules for your company.
Okay. That sounds fairly straightforward. I assume that bylaws are pretty standard or not?
They start off standard. There's what I call vanilla. And then as you grow, through our life cycle of our companies, you might change them. You might realize that, for example, that you no longer, or that the president should not be the executive director, that you need to have somebody that actually does the day-to-day work. And so you put that in the bylaws of what that person's role is.
And I would assume that, for example, most small dance companies don't need committees, but as a dance company gets bigger, and there are more roles, things like committees and structure becomes a little bit more elaborate. Would that be in a bylaw or not?
Again, the bylaws is shouldn't be changed that often. These are votes that your board should take. So your board might say there's no committees, but then all of a sudden you're having an event. You might want to have a party committee, a gala committee, a committee to find space for the company now, because that the board can't do everything when usually the board is made up of the artistic people and the friends and family. So that would go into the minutes. It's only later that you might want to come back and say, okay, we're always going to have a fundraising, a development committee.
Got it. Makes sense. All right. So we've got a certificate of incorporation. We've got the bylaws, which are the scaffolding. And number 3 is
the SS4, which is, in other words, your EIN, your employment identification number. Again, going back to the Greek goddess and the baby scenario here, this is your social security number. So once you're born, you get your social security number. And as a company, once you're formed, you get your EIN number. And from there, you can go to the bank and open a bank account. And this creates a real sense of formality and legitimacy, that now you're not just an artist with your mission to create, but you actually have this entity to protect you and hold yourself out with.
Yeah, in Dance Data Project's case, I was really surprised. There was a huge backlog, but we got our EIN number almost right away. We opened a bank account, et cetera, but it was almost 10 months later before we got our, official acknowledgement that we were a 501c3.
Oh, that's common. And again, we're going back to my original definition, because it's a phased process. And I'm hoping we'll have a chance to talk about this in a little bit. But initially, there's the birth process where you become that corporation, that company with your EIN number, and you can perform and you're protected. And you, if something happens and there's liability, they can only go after the company and not after you personally, which is
So that's absolutely critical, and we'll talk about some of the benefits of being a corporation versus an individual in a minute. All right. So and now you exist, right? The federal government knows who you are. You can open a bank account. What's next?
What's next is, I tell you to take a deep breath and do your work, create during this time period. This is where now you are out there looking for spaces, looking for collaborators, looking for money, hold that thought, to actually put on the show and put on your performances and do your outreach. Here is, during this time period, is like I say, take a breath, wait, because you'll know when you should get that 501c3. And you'll know it. It's like you'll know it when you need it.
So when you talk about raising money, we have found that a lot of foundations, some individuals, but a lot of government organizations won't start funding you until you've been in existence for, in some cases, 3 and in some cases 5 years. And they're looking for activity in some cases, and they're looking for, this sort of legal acknowledgement that you exist in others. So it's probably a good idea to get this done right away. It doesn't mean you actually, you're going to do everything, but it is good to sort of put a pin in it, because the clock starts running from that date forward.
Correct. Agreed. I strongly recommend that individual artists, individual choreographers get that protection of the corporate entity. But then what? And this is the fun part. Donors want to give money. That's their job. Funders fund, donors donate. And it depends, though, to whom they donate, what your capacity is. Is this time to talk about the difference between a fiscal sponsor and the
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. Like I said, take a breath, wait, because there's a lot of work that you're doing here that doesn't have to do with the actual creation of your art. So what I recommend at this point is to, as you mentioned, to make an agreement with a fiscal sponsor. And what that is an umbrella organization that is a not-for-profit, which now you know what that is, that's set up to take monies for individual companies that don't yet have that recognition. For example, in New York, the Field is quite well known, Circum Arts, Fractured Atlas. I would write a check to Fractured Atlas or the Field and say, I'm going to write $100 check. And I said, I would like that monies to go to dance that get that recognition. That fiscal sponsor, that umbrella organization, can take a small percentage. Now, I know it doesn't sound fair when you're doing all the work and you're out there getting the artists and the musicians and the lighting designers, but that's what they're there for, is to help do the administration for you and protect you that way when the monies come in, and write the thank you note that is required by law to the donor. So this is what you learn if you take this phased in approach as a new not-for-profit corporation, is to use a fiscal sponsor.
And do those fiscal sponsors do your bookkeeping for you, do other things for you?
They can. Again, everything, it depends on that fiscal sponsor, but usually you'll pay for each kind of activity that they provide for you. And sometimes you want a full spreadsheet. Other times you want, take the money in, dollars in, and then please give me my $90 or $95, and that's it. Some places will give you, if you have independent contractors, will give you the forms that you need to give to the IRS or to the state that you're in. They can provide that backup for you.
And there's a whole discussion around whether you should have independent contractors and employees and how that works. As almost everybody knows, Dance Data Project, in part because of funding limitations, we're almost all remote. And we have independent contractors, which have different requirements in different forms than employees, including very much part-time employees. So you've taken a break, you've started your work, you're thinking things through, maybe you have a fiscal sponsor. What's next?
Well, from my point of view, as from the legal lens, what do you need to protect yourself while you're doing your work? This is all about protection. I do transactional law. So I always say I'm a lover, not a fighter. I don't go to court. So I'm trying to make sure that the companies are thriving. So it's part of that. The next document that is in the dance company in the box is the conflicts of interest policy. Now, this is required by all states and the IRS. With the point being that everything that you do is you are doing for the company. You are not for yourself. For example, I would write, if I have dance company and my significant other owns a building, and I say, oh, look, my significant other, my partner, is going to give us dance space. We should do that. I bring that to the board. Is this a conflict for me to bring in free dance space? Is this a conflict for me to bring in reduced priced dance space when this is somebody who's related to me? And these are the questions that we need to be really aware of when we start putting together or continuing our activities for our not-for-profit, is to make sure that everything that I am doing as a director is for the good of the company. So I should not be making money from this. My significant other should not be making money from this.
That is not how it works, by the way, a lot in Chicago, but just saying that's the ideal. One of the things you mentioned in passing, and I think is important to let everybody know, is a couple of distinctions. What can happen to you personally if you don't have these corporate protections in place? But then we also want to distinguish getting sued versus winning, because a lot of people, I think, make the mistake thinking, well, if I have these protections in place, I won't be sued. And I want to make clear to everybody that there's, yes, it's a suit of armor, but there's no magical sort of sphere around you. If somebody can still sue you, it just very much lessens their opportunity to go after your personal assets. So can you talk about what this, how you would set things up, what the potential is. I mean, people can, I don't want anybody to lose their house, right?
Right. Again, there's 1,000 answers to this because there's 1,000 different scenarios. But essentially, the reason why you have this corporate entity is that if something happens, and we'll start with insurance. Let's start with on stage or in the space that you've rented, and something happens to someone there. They slip, they fall. One of your dancers slips and falls and gets hurt. Who do they turn to be made whole? They will look at the company. They will look at the board of directors of the company to see that their medical bills are paid. They'll have their insurance company go after the insurance company of the dance company, and we'll get there, and possibly after the directors. So first things first, by having the corporate entity, the directors are covered for regular negligence, for something that is normal. So if someone slips on stage, who is an independent contractor, this is part of what could happen. This is, we've mopped the floor. There's made sure there's nothing on it. We've taken all possible precautions. That's regular negligence, and in that sense, that suit could only affect the company, what's in the company's bank account. Let's take it the next step. Again, there's 1,000 different scenarios that one of the directors is angry at one of the dancers and goes up there and throws a drink at them during performance. And that drink causes them to slip and fall and they get injured. Then that dancer can not only go after the dance company, but because this is gross negligence. This is willful and wanton. And it sounds crazy, but we know human beings and
stuff happens.
Stuff happens. So if something is grossly negligent, then there is likely to not have the same protections personally that you would unless something was just negligent.
Which is why eventually we're going to be talking about a code of conduct, which not just the dancers should sign, but the members of the board, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so we've gone through conflicts of interest policy, which is essentially, this is not an opportunity for Aunt Dahlia to make a ton of money through a not-for-profit. So she can't rent out dance space that is really worth $400 per square foot for $950, for example.
Rent it out for $200 per square foot, unless she's transparent or he's transparent about it. So long as, and I'd like to get to the next document in our toolbox, which is the annual disclosure. What that is, the first one is a policy that you pretty much like Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, and you say, I pledge not to do anything unless it's for the good of the mission. Now in your annual disclosure, you say, I am an attorney. My partner has a big building. I'm on the board of this private foundation. So everything is transparent and laid out. So everyone knows on that board, and it's in the files. This is not public knowledge, but that the board knows that if something comes up for rental space, I can say, look, I can get us space for $200. And everyone will say, but is that a conflict? And I'll say, well, no, because one, you all know that this is my partner's building. Two, we've checked similarly situated spaces and they're at 400 or 500 or 900. And we've documented that. And if I lay it all out, everybody votes on it, you can use it.
And then the annual disclosure is where
I write down who I am, what significant other does, what my children, it goes up and down the line. And it helps for transparency. So there's no secrets. So I'm not making money doing so.
Or nobody can question you.
Correct.
So that's number 6. What's next?
Well, the first part was forming your own non-for-profit. And these are the kind of documents that one would need as part of best practices of putting it together when we birthed it. So now we're operating it. Now we're raising it. Now these are the kind of documents that we would all need when we're actually now doing our mission, doing our activities, doing our programming. So the next one, and this is something that I know is very important to DDP, and I'm so pleased to be of help with this, is an employee manual. And this manual is something in which all the policies and reporting is available to everyone who works or volunteers to the organization. And in that, especially in today's world where we're much more attuned to inequities, that there are anti-harassment policies, there are anti-discrimination policies, and these are not just something to sign. These are really something that everyone should sit down and actually have an all hands on deck meeting and say quickly, this is what these are. And this includes, and I saw you nodding, not just employees, but the volunteers as well.
Anybody and everybody walking in the building. Yep. Yep. And I think that part of the problem with the dance world, performing arts in general, is everybody's always in a hurry. Everybody's, time is money, working against a budget. I think both you and I are saying it's really important, sort of like a medical team right before they start operating in somebody, to take a timeout. And the timeouts were created because people were getting the wrong procedure, or the right procedure on the wrong leg, or whatever. And it sounds to me like what you're saying is, you don't just have it. It doesn't just exist. This needs to be gone over and reviewed, right?
Correct. And every time you do a new program. So it's not just once a year. So for example, when rehearsal starts, the first time there's rehearsal, to me, I would even do it again, dress, because this is the first time really everybody's there and you think, oh no, we don't have time. The lighting's lit up. Do it again. This is important.
Do it again, because people change at the last minute, et cetera. I'm also a big fan, having been a management labor attorney, of writing it out and having everybody initial it. It's much harder to say, I didn't see, I didn't know, I wasn't there, if your signature's on it. And this protects everybody who comes into contact with each other. So people think in hierarchical terms, but this is sort of a living, breathing community. And these kind of employee manuals and policies protect people up, down, and around, right? So, yeah. So it's just a good reminder. So employee manual, you're up and running. You want people to behave a certain way. You don't just slap this together and then put it in a drawer. This is a document that needs to be looked at and talked about quite a bit. And anything further on that, or what's next?
I think what's next, and you touched on this earlier, is who are we working with? So do we have employees? Do we have independent contractors? Usually when we're starting off, there's no full-time employees, because that means having to pay, insurance and taxes, and having, payroll. So there's an independent contractor agreement that we've included in this box. And it's a form of agreement between the company and that artist, or the company and the instructor. The company lays out the lists of responsibilities and the liabilities, including, and I've had a number of interesting negotiations with this, about who owns the copyright. So sometimes you'll have someone come in as the music director, but if we have asked them to collaborate with us, or we've commissioned them to work for this specific performance or piece or work, who does that belong to? And so this kind of lays that out in the beginning.
Which I think is really important. I just want to sort of revisit the idea that it's a group of friends getting together to put on a show, and nobody thinks anything is going to go wrong. We're all friends, nobody will sue us, etc. It's like roommates, right? Everybody starts out with the best of intentions, but if there's either a huge success or a major disaster, that things start to change. So it's a good idea to take the time. Okay, so you've got your, who are we working with? Independent contractor. What next?
We are living through the global pandemic, and we've included a COVID-19 agreement. This provides notice for everybody who's participating in person, including those that are independent contractors, those volunteers, and what kind of protocols we have. For example, in terms of, please wear your mask, when you are, not, I don't know, performing. I mean, there's a million different ways of doing it, but this lays out what.
And I think what that does is, if you have a set policy for everybody, it's just easier to enforce, and nobody can say that's my dog yipping in the background. If everybody can hear her, she's dreaming about chasing something. But it sort of takes the onus off of the stage manager or the rehearsal director or the front desk person to say, please put on your mask. If you can just hand somebody a policy, it's much easier to enforce than requiring people to do it on a case-by-case basis, which is just so difficult.
Oh, I know. A lot of these I would actually post someplace as well. I would put it up, tape it to the door someplace, tape it somewhere. So at least, it's up there, and say, look, it's up there if anybody needs to review it.
I would say that with the code of conduct, just so everybody knows it's an expectation, and everybody with the COVID policy, which is also part of a code of conduct in some ways. We're here to keep each other safe. And it does, we're about to hit number 10. So I think it can sound a little bit overwhelming, but what you've noted to me is that not everything has to be done all at once at the same time, right?
Correct. It's phased out. It's phased in. Absolutely.
But you do need to be thinking about it. And what's next?
This kind of goes back to the independent contractor agreement. It's called a mutual non-disclosure agreement. This seems complicated, but it protects everybody's ownership of the work. This is specifically among artists and collaborators and the company, and it's prior to the relationship. So again, I go back to the music example, hypothetical, where we've asked, X to come in and create a beautiful classical-esque hip hop work for us that will work with this piece, and they can't then just take it and use it somewhere else and say it's theirs. It belongs to the company, unless we have an agreement and say, all right, we'll license to you, or yeah, sure, you could use it, but we want credit for it. I mean, these are the kind of things that you need to outline in these.
Absolutely, so that people can feel free to create openly, etc. And yeah, I can understand how that would be a problem. Or if somebody thinks they're creating a new work and then the judge goes back and it sounds exactly like what was done in rehearsal.
I also just want to clarify a little bit more. So when I say non-disclosure agreement, it's also if during rehearsals or during meetings with management or meetings, that when we're talking about some of these things, that it's confidential. So we could say we're going to have a meeting about the creation of this work specifically. Anything that happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It's one of those. So it's to protect everybody during that time period.
Right. And even in Dance Data Project, I made you sign one, all the advisory council and board members, all my team members sign one, in part so that if we consider an idea and then somebody says that's the lamest thing I've ever heard, we can gently jettison it, no harm, no foul, right? But you have to be free to sort of think these things through. Anything else that we should be including?
I think that's it for this point, because at this point, having created your not-for-profit corporation, having your EIN number, getting a fiscal sponsor, having all of these tools you'll be able to have this sense of a protection, a feeling of that you can go forward and do your work. The next part I think I'd like to just touch on, though, is how do you go from this fledgling corporation to the next step for tax recognition, if I might?
Sure.
My recommendation is don't do it till you need it, and you will know it when you need it, which is you've caught on. The field, fractured atlas, circumarts, you're getting confused feedback from donors saying, but Lauren, I really want to give to your company. I don't want to give to this other company. And so at that point, you can then make an application to the IRS for your 501c3 recognition, which is your letter of determination. It sounds like very legal, and it kind of is, but I'm going to use the word poetry and the IRS in one sentence.
Wow. Wow. It's going to be a long sentence.
You can use music, you can use art, you can write poetry in your application to the IRS when it comes to this part of what you're doing, because we in America, in the United States, wants the charities to work. This is a big part of the very fiber of this country. So it's fun to do this part for me, but I like writing.
But you're a geek, so so you'll kind of know when it's time to make that application. I just want to come back from the fact that you don't apply on a Tuesday and get it on a Wednesday.
Oh no.
It's a big, long process with a rabbit hole, and sometimes you have no idea where you're at. And then you get it, and you stick it up in the wall, and it's a big day. In the final moments that we have, this is the horror story and the glory time. Tell me, because the do's and the don'ts, right? You've given me some do's, but just sort of really practical advice based on how many years of practice you've been in. The most common mistakes that people who want to start a performing arts organization or dance company in particular make. The three things you would say: absolutely do this before you get going.
I would absolutely, as I said, strongly recommend. I would absolutely incorporate to protect yourself. And from there, you do say we. It becomes we. It's not an I thing. It's the we of the company. It is the we of the mission. It is the we of your supporters and your donors and the artists. The second do is do see other work. Be aware of what's happening in the field. Really see what's out there. And finally, do ask questions. The gatekeepers might seem intimidating, but ask them what they like. So, for example, I mentioned earlier, it's the role of the presenters to present. Ask them questions. It's the role of the funders to fund. It's the role of the donors to donate. So ask them questions. So if you're presenting ballet, ask them for money, but make sure that you're asking someone that supports dance and not supporting, say, medical research, that you're asking the right questions to the right person. And finally, ask for feedback. Don't be afraid. I do have a quick few don'ts.
Oh yeah, let's do the don'ts.
Here's the don'ts. The don'ts: don't burn bridges with anyone. They could be on a grant panel. They could be a future funder. They could be your boss somewhere else. Second, don't shit where you eat. Okay.
Meaning,
don't date a dancer. Now, I know that sounds silly, but it's serious. I'm very cognizant of inter-office relationships, inter-company relationships. There are so many issues that arise when things go sideways. So be careful. And again, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, and I would say, me from the donor side, I could do a hilarious, and I have done, I think people thought it was very funny presentation of the worst philanthropic asks that I've ever been given. And I could, I usually limit it to 5 or 6, but if we're going to say do's and don'ts, it's understand, this is not on the strictly legal side, but understand who you're talking to. I serve on a couple of boards where they keep talking over my head past me to my husband. And I'm just like, no, I'm actually the board member here. And jazz is great, but jazz and journalism are not what I'm interested in. But your husband is like, yeah, but he doesn't write the checks, talk to him, talk to me. I think the other thing that I would note is that, whether it's Hollywood, I was talking to an executive producer or a director of a movie where they've asked me to be an executive producer, which I'm delighted to do because it's not money, it's advice. Everybody's always in a hurry. The clock is always running. So things that seem non-essential get left out. But as we know, whether it's from a gun being fired on a set, rust, or basic protocols of who's coming in and out, food service, to how we treat each other, I think you don't realize how important that stuff is and how important the time is to take that time out until something goes wrong, right?
Absolutely.
And I think, both you and I would feel like you'd rather have it right in the beginning. Lauren Cramer, dear friend, brilliant legal mind, goddess, Greek goddess of the performing arts, giving birth to them. Thank you very, very much. We could go on for hours, but maybe we'll do a to be continued. So thank you so much to those of you who are listening, and have fun and go make art, right? I guess.